Hi, I'm Micah, welcome to the channel, and right now in fashion's current state, creative directors move around a lot. We see them get hired and fired to the point that the second a creative director leaves a house, everyone's already speculating what other major fashion house they'll be moving to. We don't even consider for a moment that maybe someone who's slightly less profile or less in the public eye could be up for grabs for the position. And the reason we feel like that is mainly because of the framework that fashion have presented to us. We've been shown that at the moment anyway, this is the way the game works. After every season fashion week, there are some sort of believable rumors that some creative director is going to be leaving the house they're currently at. I mean, it feels like every season there's a rumor that Daniel Lee will be leaving Burberry. And every single season I believe them. Not because I don't think the work he's doing there is good, but because we've seen time and time again that creative directors really can just exit at any time nowadays. In the last 9 months, we've seen, and these are just the ones I remember while I'm making this video, Hedi Slimane to exit Celine, Alessandro Michele to exit Gucci, Alessandro Michele to move to Valentino, Sarah Burton exit McQueen, Sarah Burton to Givenchy, Matthew Blazy exit Bottega Veneta, Matthew Blazy moved to Chanel, Peter Hawkins to exit Tom Ford, Haider Ackermann to Tom Ford, Peter Coppin to Lanvin, Lucy and Luke Meyer to exit Jill Sander, and Simone Bellotti to enter Jill Sander. And this is just what I remember in the last 9 months. And at times, these movements can feel pretty forced, boring, and in terms of exits, often feel very premature. I mean, we've now seen it more than once where creative directors are exiting brands after showing just one collection or just one season. Think of Ludovic at Andy or Peter Coppin at Tom Ford. And I'm sure for many it culminates into that question of why? Why is fashion playing musical chairs with these creative directors, sitting them down at one house or another, with fantastic talent being hired so quick and fired so quick that you can barely remember who's at which house? So that's what we're going to do in this video today. I'm going to explain and explore why creative directors move around so much at the moment, as well as talk about why long term this is actually a very big problem for fashion. So first we're going to very quickly address the very organic reason why creative directors move around. And that is just due to the cyclical nature of the job. Eventually, when people have had long-standing roles at houses, people and designers, creative directors might feel like they've given everything they have to give to fashion and want to step down, or they pass away holding the role that they currently have. And in both of those cases, obviously, you're going to need to hire someone new. And these tend to come in waves because, you know, long-standing positions at houses might last 10, 15 years. So over the last 5 years, that's been, you know, like Azzedine Alaïa, Karl Lagerfeld, Virgil Abloh, Jean-Paul Gaultier stepping down from like couture. Obviously, they haven't hired someone new per se yet, but like Issey Miyake. So you see that that's just in the last kind of 5 years. So that those come in waves and are a more natural span. And those aren't really going to cause any problems for fashion because that's the natural progression of things. That's the organic way things are supposed to go. But I say cyclical as well because, like I said, those 5, 6, or 7 names I listed are names across the last 5 years. And they don't even nearly account for the amount of movement I listed earlier that reflect just the last 9 months. And that takes us to the real reason for all this movement and musical chairs amongst houses and creative directors. And that really comes down to money. We're in what I call late stage high fashion, or it's essentially just late stage capitalism, where a handful of conglomerates run and own most, if not all, of the major luxury brands. And these conglomerates are publicly traded stock on the stock market. So they're very heavily dependent and involved in worrying about their share price, how much the company is valuable, and they're looking to always report profits every year in order to maintain the value of their share price. With these sorts of brands, if they report they've made a profit of 10 mil this year, next year they're looking to make a profit of 11 mil and then 13 mil. They're not happy just making 10 mil profit every year. Their profit margins need to continue to grow in order for their stock price to continue to grow. And in order to maintain these profits and these stock prices, risk taking is at an all-time low in fashion compared to how it was maybe 2 or 3 decades ago. It's seen as too risky to bet on new or experimental talent. Brands are not really looking to take a risk with a brand new creative director or a more experimental designer or creative director because shareholders and business people are not looking to take risks. They're looking to make money. So they see it as, why bet on someone who maybe hasn't had the job before when we can bet on someone that we've seen at another house who managed to raise the revenue and profit margins over there. Let's take Sarah Burton from McQueen, because we know that at McQueen she was able to maintain their revenue, rather than maybe betting on some new talent that we've incubated. And the irony of this method is that it's the complete opposite of the era where some of the most beloved and coveted designers came up in. Designers like, Tom Ford at Gucci, Alexander McQueen, Galliano. At the time, a lot of these decisions were seen as risks or bets. And yes, quite calculated risks in some of the cases, but still very much a risk. These were individuals who hadn't directed at a multi-million-dollar fashion house and were very much stepping into these sorts of roles for the first time. And obviously it paid off a ton then, because we now see these people as some of the most coveted designers in the industry. And the big reason that these roles were less scary for conglomerates back then was because there was just a lot less money in fashion in general, and brands hadn't realized the true scope of how far they could kind of take this luxury thing. So there was a lot less money on the line, and they were a lot more willing to take these risks. Luxury back then was a lot more focused on the quality of the product and the craft, as opposed to marketing like it is today. So we've sort of highlighted why it's the same group of people in these creative director positions who are moving around amongst the houses, but now I'm gonna cover why they're moving around at the rate and frequency that they are today. In the last few years, we've seen more creative director movements than we have across the last few decades, honestly. And once again, it's down to money. If a house does place one of these low risk investments and calculated bets on a creative director, like I mentioned earlier, they also want to see the fruits of their investment. They want to see the money. They want to see the profits. So if a brand has targeted that they want to increase their profit margins by, say, 10% this year, and with their creative director they only achieve a 7% increase in profit margins, then this is often seen as a failure, and pressure might be put on that creative director to maybe go down a more commercial route or design more commercial collections. And if that doesn't work, then the creative director might get cut loose and have to exit the brand. And yeah, we've seen this in recent years with, Alessandro Michele at Gucci, even Hedi Slimane at Celine, whatever's going on at Jill Sander right now. And it's not even necessarily that, these people are losing these brands money. It's just maybe the growth has slowed down, or the company and the business side feel like they're paying the creative director too much money for how much the profit margins are, so they want to just let that person go. A lot of these and most of the exits we're seeing are often due to financial reasons. And don't get me wrong, I believe that part of being a good and effective creative director is being able to sell units and sell product in this day and age. That's the framework that fashion is. If your product isn't desired and it's not being sold, then that's just art, it's not necessarily fashion. But if a designer like Alessandro Michele or Hedi Slimane has 2x or 3x your brand's annual revenue, as well as breathing new life and a new image into your brand, then letting them go because things have slowed down a little and you want to chase profits seems like even more of a dice roll to me. Sacrificing, longevity and established brand identity just to chase what potentially could make money seems like more of a gamble, and it just doesn't seem very wise to me. It doesn't make sense. And I really want to emphasize that we're talking about a slowing down of profit growth. These brands aren't losing money in these cases. It's that they're aiming for, 10% growth, 12% growth, and they're only reaching 7% growth, 8% growth. So the brands are still very much making money. Very rarely are these brands losing money because of these creative directors. So yeah, when these profits are slowing down, these brands are quick to cut whoever they have at the moment loose and look for another creative director that they can bring in, maybe someone who's aligned with a current trend at the moment, like quiet luxury or something like that, with the hope that their revenue will now continue to hit the growth margins they're aiming for. So I think that's what a lot of people felt like happened with the whole Gucci situation and moving to Sabato De Sarno after leaving Alessandro Michele. So yeah, we've covered why the same creative directors are kind of moving around along the houses and why chasing profits had led to these movements being more frequent. But now I really want to cover why this is a wider and quite a big problem in fashion, especially long term. The first problem I'm going to highlight is that, this sort of musical chairs around the industry with creative directors really hinders their creativity and prevents them from fully executing the plan and the vision that they had at a house. I mean, earlier I touched on the fact that we've literally seen creative directors be cut loose and exit brands after just 1 or 2 seasons of showing their collections. And this is almost always for financial reasons, as we've covered earlier. If the collection or direction you've kind of chosen and selected for the house isn't making the profits that the shareholders deem most important, then it's very easy for them to just cut you loose over that. And often when you see articles like, oh, the designer had creative differences with the house, that essentially means the house said, oh, we want you to go left, and the designer said, no, I want to go right. They butted heads, and then one of them had to leave. And obviously the only reason the house will even be telling you to make certain kinds of decisions are for financial reasons and to make a more commercial product. And this is such a shame because brands are being very short-sighted when they do this. It's very rare that you can flesh out all of your ideas, motifs, and codes for a house in just one collection. It often takes 3, 4, or even 5 collections to really, present and develop your world to an audience so that they understand it and then can buy into it. I feel like Daniel Lee's Bottega, Hedi Slimane's Celine, and Nicolas Gasquier's Louis Vuitton are all perfect examples of this, where maybe initially it didn't seem like they hit the ground running, but within a few collections they were able to really flesh out the entire world that they're going for, and consumers were really able to understand it and then buy into it, and the brand was able to skyrocket. And whether it's because these new ideas are such a large pivot from whatever the house was doing previously, or just the new ideas are very large to digest, I think all of these are great examples of how a house has been able to really grow their audience naturally and organically once the world's been built out, and then generate those huge revenue margins and profit margins for the house later down the line. These are great sightings of where, with time, the house really attracted an audience that then converted into sales, revenue, and profit for the house. So it's a win-win. By cutting designers loose too quick, we're really missing out on where these ideas could have led to. And the director is back at square one, where they have to go through the same process again with another house. And even the house is missing out on the profit and revenue that they could have gotten if they gave the designer more time to flesh out their ideas. So they're just stifling creativity at this point. And the second reason that I say that this game of musical chairs is very problematic, because at some point the bubble has to burst. Let me explain. Remember how earlier I said that luxury has shifted focus from, craftsmanship and quality to marketing? That marketing comes in many forms, but one of them is, the star power and the celebrity of the creative director themselves. That's one of the reasons why the same names are being shifted around these luxury houses, is because these names hold weight, and that weight sells luxury goods. But at this point, when we combine the financial profit chasing with what I was saying about chasing star power and marketing, it makes you realize that these brands very rarely want to hire someone who has a less star power than their previous creative director did. They rarely want to hire a smaller name. And this kind of idea and sentiment is about half of that bubble I spoke about earlier that I think has to pop. At some point you reach, peak star power in a creative director, where there's no one left within your budget to hire that has more star power and more celebrity and holds a bigger name than your previous creative director did. And I think a very obvious and perfect example of this is Louis Vuitton menswear. moving from Kim Jones to Virgil Abloh to Pharrell Williams. Pharrell is a global icon for both music and fashion, a genuine A-list celebrity by every definition of the word. So where do you even go after him? Who in fashion has more star power? There isn't one, and that's why I say this is one half of the bubble. At some point you reach peak star power and then the bubble pops. There is no more musical chairs to be chased. And the other half of the bubble I was talking about, and I think one that I'm definitely gonna flesh out more in another video, is just this idea of chasing profits and always having more profit on your year-on-year margins. At some point, that bubble is also going to have to burst. You can't make profit forever. It might be a long way away, but this metric of measuring creative directors by their financial success and how much they can grow your profit margins is not sustainable in the long run. At some point, you're going to have exhausted all of the potential customers that are available to your brand and were interested in buying it. And then what do? The bubble pops. And this cycle of chasing star power within fashion is how we end up with creative director appointments that seem pretty forced or boring. Appointments like Riccardo Tisci at Burberry, Sabata Desano at Gucci, and even Sarah Burton at Givenchy, to me highlight this unnecessary game of musical chairs being played in fashion where it doesn't need to be. But yeah, I feel like in this video we've really covered and explored just what these kind of musical chairs is in fashion at the moment and why it's happening. You know, we've dug deep into understanding why essentially money and profits are just the root of houses no longer risk-taking with their decision-making nowadays. It feels more and more rare for us to see fresh or lesser known talent showcase an established luxury house. And often, even with talent that we are familiar with, they feel sort of boxed in with how well they're able to execute their creative vision. And it's funny because this is a video I've actually wanted to make for a long time. And every time I delay it, you know, I'm thinking, oh no, I've missed the prime time to make a video like this. And then another announcement comes out and I'm like, oh, you know, this proves my point even more. But genuinely, let me know your thoughts on the topic. I want to see if other people kind of agree and have been thinking the way that I feel about this, because this is how I've been feeling about fashion for the last like 3 or 4 years, I'd say, really. And I also really want to know if there's any aspects that you think I've missed, or there's, you know, something that I haven't considered. But thank you for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and on the screen there is a video for you that I think you'll enjoy.